Anyway, so what I'm covering right now is how I'm feeding this wire harness through this hole I made. I made this grommet right here. Right now you see that about 30-inch long HVAC zip tie with the end cut off. Already fed through on this side. And then this is the other side. I don't know if you can see it going through right there. And I'm going to feed the harness through that. Before we feed that harness through that, we have to prepare the harness for feeding. And now we're gonna just close these ends up here. This is gonna come off later. I'm gonna go through. Actually, I could have just done it in one piece. I don't like to rip the electrical tape. I know some of you guys like to do that. Just it stretches it out. And what you want to do is get this so it's the edges are, there's nothing that hangs up on little things that it might get fed through. This end. All right, next thing I'm gonna do is take, this is the very end. This is the end of the long zip tie. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tape it to this piece right here. Just so you guys know that aren't super familiar with wiring, this particular trick is probably the most valuable trick I've ever learned in wiring, especially in automotive wiring. Feeding, because the zip tie is so thick, you can pre-feed this and then you secure your wire. You want this length to be long enough so that there's enough adhesive, and you also want to try to minimize this. You don't want like a ledge to get caught on that and then rip it off. So you try to, when you wrap the tape, you try to make a nice little ramp. What you could also do is, this is a long zip tie, like a HVAC zip tie. You can just find them at Home Depot and just cut the big thick head off and just use the remainder of it. You can actually drill a hole right in here and then put a piece of wire, like hook it through there, and then, you know, tape it down here. You could do that too. That makes sure for sure it doesn't come out. Last thing you want is for you to be pulling this through some sort of line or behind a panel. It gets caught up and it pulls off, and then your wire's halfway through, you got to go, and your zip tie is out, and you got to redo everything. That's what's critical about making sure there's enough adhesive on here. And when you're pulling it through, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave this here. This is just kind of sitting here loosely. What I'm gonna do is go to the other side and pull it out. Here we are on the other side. What you gotta do is you gotta kind of just pull it very carefully. See, there's our other end. If it gets caught up, don't keep pulling. What you want to do is go to the other side and see what's snagging on. You might have to push through from the other side. Let's see what we got here. There we go. And see, that's what it was. It was the other section that I had taped off, and that's why you tape that off. Now this is what I wanted exposed. The remainder of it, I'm gonna leave inside the car. Through the holes there. Boom. I got it. Just kind of laying across the engine right now. All right. Just press on. I'm gonna do this short little section here first. I'm gonna try to meet up with this one. Cut it. This is where the right tools comes into play, guys. Making wire harnesses. This tool right here is pretty pricey. It's DMC. This is some aerospace ratchet tools. There's some Chinese knockoffs that I'm not a big fan of. But this particular part is like a ton of dies for, like, I have like 15 different dies for this thing for pretty much any type of connector that's made. This is brand new. This is probably, man, I think I saw it for sale for like $700-800. I got it off some used site where some company was closing down and selling off their tooling locally, like an auction. So it was still like $200, but it's been worth it. You might be able to find them cheaper or whatever, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the knockoff tools. I like the real deal. Okay. Blue. Click. And you got the retainer clip that goes inside. And you just gotta use a little tool here to hold it. And it goes inside here. And what it does is it keeps those pins in there good tight. Last but not least, I'm gonna do the heat shrink. So, my cool little battery powered DeWalt heat gun has come in handy. I try to keep things so that they're not chafing or there's any stress being put on any runs or any connections or anything. Okay. There we go. That one's done. We're removing the big zip tie. I want to keep this stuff on here for the time being. This hole here, I'm going to drill out a little bit bigger so I can fit this grommet here, so I can feed wires through it and not chafe or cut. Go this way, which is fine. Make sure these things are seated right. I usually take a screwdriver and kind of run it through here. That is a nice little rubber grommet there. All right. So, as you can see, I have one I already made a while ago, right? I want to feed this through here. Unfortunately, I was not forward thinking enough to make this wire long enough. It's literally like 6 inches too short to make it to the connector that I want to get to here if I go that far out. So it would have been nice to just use that same hole, but I can't, so I got to make another one right here. If I come out right here, that gives me just a little bit more length. Another 1/2 inch grommet I'm going to put right in here. Before we do that, I want to trim a little bit of this insulation. There you go. then feed it through here. Just put the ends on here and we're good. I'm gonna pull this out actually and go ahead and do the heat shrink tubing now. Oh, it's easy to access. I'm not gonna trim any of this. So it's the same heat shrink tubing I used over there. Go ahead and remove all the tape now, or at least from here. Make sure you feed it the way you want it to go. Just look at everything, how it's gonna go in and be utilized here. Get off there. Boom. Okay. Actually, we will need to trim the red one. Since they're not equal, at some point the one of the red line got longer than the orange, and these need to be the same length. So easy peasy. So we're gonna cut it out. Okay. So the other one was. The other set I did previously was 18 gauge. I need to set this to 16 because these wires are a little bit thicker. It crimps properly. 3 hairs. Obviously you want the maximum amount of conductors making contact here. So this isn't really ideal, but for some reason this particular wire seemed like it was just a tiny bit, because these are for 16 to 18 gauge wire. These crimp terminals, so I had to trim off like 2 or 3 little strands. Got the little rubber piece there. So red goes to here first. Click, and then the orange. We should have done it at the same time. Would have been way better. There we go, click. Okay. And just as the other end had a retainer clip, this one does too. Boom. And then we shall connect it. And then I'll zip tie everything. And we are. Zip tie holding that. You gotta be careful cutting these zip ties. If you cut them at the wrong angle, they can become widow makers, man. And we are finished with the 2-step wiring installation. What I'm gonna do now is hook it up back to the laptop, make sure everything's functioning, connected still, before I seal up the cowl. One thing I need to finish is, and I'm gonna do that later, that's my battery charger. This cable right here, it goes to the battery junction box, to the battery terminal here. Provides power to the battery junction box. Now this thing used to be fed, it used to go straight down, went all the way down there, came all the way back up here, and then did a right turn. That gave you no slack. So what I did is I just removed it, and right now it's just laying here. I'm going to get a shorter, I just need a shorter one with crimp ends. I'm just gonna go, just kind of curl around here. So That will be my next part of the project.